Hello everyone and welcome back to the next episode of Art Side of Life, where I chat with inspiring artists and create various art-related videos. My name is Eva and my guest today is Brad Bean, and in this episode you will learn about his art process, working with clients, and why he sometimes screws up on purpose.
And then I just sit there and I draw for about an hour, hour and a half, and that's just my time to get out ideas, and I screw up on purpose. So that is something that I've learned to do as well in my sketchbook, is not try to make a nice piece of art for the internet and for Instagram. It's to really push myself and say, screw up on purpose and see what you can do, because you always learn more from your mistakes.
Brett is a character designer, visual development artist, and a teacher. He is an owner of Drawn to It Studios, creating original content and outsourcing for companies big and small. His work has been featured across films, TV shows, video games, comic books, cardboard games, and children's books. Brett has been in the entertainment business for over 12 years and worked with Disney, Dreamworks, Riot Games, Hanson's Creature Shop, Marvel, Penguin Books, Scholastic, and more. So please welcome Brad Bean and let's get to the interview. So welcome everyone to the next episode of Art Side of Life, and I'm super happy to have Brad here. Hi!
Hello.
How are you?
Hey everybody. I'm good. How are you?
Good, perfect. And let's just start with your background right away, and maybe you can tell us some fun stories from your childhood when you were first time like creative, or when you decided, okay, I want to take this professionally.
Okay, all right. So my childhood is I started drawing in church because church was really boring to me. So I would take any piece of paper or the pamphlets or whatever, and I would just draw on the back of it. So I had like G.I. Joe and like TIE fighters like blowing holes in like temples and the church, and my father was up on the podium. So he wouldn't see what I was doing. He would probably not be very happy, but my mom would sort of instigate me and she would draw with me. So we would just kind of sit there in the church seats and just sort of like draw stuff all happening all over. And that kind of started out the love of enjoyment of drawing. And then, it was through high school, and then I refound it years later and just went, oh, I should probably either choose to do this or not. So there's plenty of years in between where you go, society tells you to be an adult. And I was like, I better start adulting. I'm out of high school and I should go get 3 jobs and I should go to regular college. And I did that for a while. And then I got married and divorced. And then that's when I decided after the divorce, it's like, okay, if I don't start now, life will start going too fast and everything else will catch up. So then I kind of just jumped in full dive. I had to take out a personal loan and I went to a 2-year art school program, and then just kind of kept going from there. So it was kind of a wild ride to try to get into the art world.
And someone advised you to go to this art school, or like how you should approach learning and basically just how to become a professional? Did you have a mentor, or did you look up to someone like in the profession?
I didn't. I still talk to my wife about like not having a mentor. I want a mentor. I haven't had one. I'm 41 and I don't have a mentor. So I've tried to use that energy of wanting one into trying to be one for other people. But it's also much harder being on the outside as a freelancer. I'm not in a studio to work with somebody who is 10, 20 years older or somebody just smarter than me, because there's plenty of them out there. But I don't have that connection in a regular studio space to make that easy, to find. So I kind of have to do it vicariously by reading biographies, listening to audio commentaries. I do a lot of like little things like that, and reading Guillermo del Toro's book and just sort of like taking out the tidbits of information there, going, oh, that's smart. Oh, I like that. Oh, so I've sort of done it by accident, by sort of finding vicarious ways of finding the mentorship. But really it was my mom saying, like, it's like, you got to put up or shut up. You got to go. And then, so I went to art school, and then she passed away the month before I graduated. So that one was a hard one, but she was sort of the pusher of like, because she wanted to be a jazz singer and she was a crafty person and she was really that, but the world kind of made sure that she didn't get what she wanted. And so she kind of vicariously lived through us, who are doing artwork. And so we kind of related that back and forth. So she was probably the strongest proponent of that. So yeah, that was kind of the biggest push was her saying like, I didn't get to do it. If you don't start, you'll find out you'll be 60 and go, what happened? So that was sort of the biggest motivator. So yeah.
So, and kind of this helped you to go mostly through the difficult time, or what do you consider kind of the most difficult time of your art career? If it wasn't this one, or maybe what you learned from this, it's like you have to do it now or like never, kind of in a way.
I would say that I have a different take, like art career wise, like there's been down times, when an art director is not constructive, it's just giving you a critique and it's a little stingy, like, ow, oh, okay. So I've had plenty of those and like down times where you think you can't draw. I thought those days were over. I was like, one day I'm going to be professional. And then all those days are behind me of thinking I'm not good enough to do this anymore. It's like, are you kidding me? It's like almost daily still to this day. But I would say like mom passing and divorce and seeing the state of how people live their real life. Like I love traveling and it gives me a solid foundation of understanding this business better. And so when I have a bad day in the art world, it doesn't really matter to me. Like it's such a small thing compared to what real people deal with on a daily basis that when people are like, oh, when something happens in the art, it's like, oh, it's a day. So you drew bad. Big deal. Your day didn't turn out the way you wanted it because they didn't approve the one drawing that you really liked. They approved the one you didn't like. It makes it really easy. So to me, the art thing, I don't really have those sort of days anymore because my perspective has shifted so much. But I would say in my 20s and early 30s when I was just starting out and I had a giant ego and I wanted it filled by everybody else to like everything I posted. And, that stuff worried me. And luckily now I'm a little bit older, hopefully wiser, that it doesn't anymore. So yeah. I don't worry about that stuff anymore.
And what is maybe the thing you learned which helped you to progress the most in your artwork?
I would say probably the biggest thing is truly, just to add on, is losing the ego part, like trying to draw and trying to make art that is either going to get likes on social media or do something that's going to get me a job. The more art I tried to do to get a job or to say pay attention to me, once I let go of that, the easier it was to find artwork I actually liked doing. Yeah. I was like, the motivation has shifted completely. So that was probably the biggest one for me. And because there's always jumps, there's like lots of them where you learn about shapes or you learn, you reach milestones where you work. And it's like, how come I'm hitting this wall? And then one day you're like, oh, I'm over that wall. I got to go find another wall to go jump over. Right. So there's always those things. But I would say the biggest jump has been it's not like you don't care, but the idea behind the motivation of caring has shifted.
Yeah.
And
can you kind of give an example of, what would be maybe the artwork which can get you a job compared to, maybe fan art?
Well, fan art, I think, is still a valid form. People love stuff and they do it. But like making a design to fit within the mold of Disney or Dreamworks or what you see trending on Twitter, hashtags, Instagram, I can go through all the big names on Instagram, and I can also find all of the people that kind of draw very similar stuff. And you can just go, oh, I know those eyes because I saw them on the Instagram post yesterday, and I saw that shape and da da da. Which is good, but I think once I got out of that rhythm of worrying about that, so I guess my example is just why did you make that piece of artwork? Mm-hmm. Is it to get attention on the internet, or is it because you needed to get it out? Because it was a design that was in your head and it was rattling around. Because I know you're making lines, and when you're making artwork, you're in your own head completely as you're drawing, and you're thinking and you're doing stuff. And then before, I would go like, okay, what line would so and so make? Or what are they going to like this shape? Are they going to like the way I do the eyes here? Because all of the cute girls have giant eyes, thank you, Disney. And then it looks like this. And then here's the chin that I'm going to make, and people are going to like this online. You're thinking about all that stuff. But now, none of that stuff enters my head. Now it's like, what's going to impress myself? What's going to make me do something and go, oh, hey, I haven't done that. I haven't seen that. That's interesting. Oh, let's take that. The motivation has shifted in all the conversations in my mind. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. And maybe can you give some bullet points how you maybe work with art process? Like when you are about to start a new project, then maybe how do you do the research, or maybe do you do thumbnails, or kind of some steps of your artistic process?
Sure. Yeah. So it really depends on, so I have different clients that ask me for different things. So some clients will have an entire idea of what the show should look like. They have like reference sheets of the style, and they have the characters down pat, and they go, this is where we're going. Let's nail this. I'm like, okay, that's pretty much, you're more of like a cog in the wheel, like a monkey. You're just sort of like trying to fit within the mold that they want. So when they're specific, I try to give them what they want, because they're the client. That's what I'm there for, is to help them out. And then you have the other clients that are much more like, we don't know what we want. We have a main character, but we're really not sure. So more of a shotgun approach. And those are the ones that the blue sky phase, they call the blue sky phase. Those are the ones that are more fun, because then it's like, well, you can go in this direction, or you can go over here, you can do this, or you can do that. So my process is usually, if I have time, I'll do paper and pencil. And my first round is kind of like a brain dump. I actually don't do reference gathering first. Mm-hmm. The first thing I do, unless it's a period piece and it's specifically like, we're going for, Victorian era, then I'm like, oh, okay, I actually don't recall what the costuming is. I should go research first. But if it's mostly like, oh, we're doing a show for, it's the main person is an 8-year-old boy, and he's got this, and then this is happening, and he loves trucks. And I'm like, oh, okay. I at least have some sort of basic knowledge of that I do a brain dump, and I try to just come up with as many ideas as I can just from myself. Mm-hmm. Then I put that aside. Then I'll do a phase of like reference gathering. Mm-hmm. And then I'll do a phase of that. And then I sort of mold the two together and come up with some hybrids. And then I will send that off. Now, if that doesn't work for the client, if nothing in there works, then it's another whole round of like, okay, what do I introduce? Let's introduce some other artist interpretations. Mm-hmm. So when I do my reference gathering, I don't reference gather any other artists. It'll just be like from like a movie. I know movies are art and all that kind of stuff. Don't get mad at me, anybody. But like not actual concept art or character designers. It'll just be like costume designs or fashion photography or something like that, cosplays, whatever it is that I'm working on. Then it'll be that road of things. Just because my interpretation of the real world things will still be my version of art. Once you start looking at other artists, their art starts to creep in a little bit. Mm-hmm. So I try to leave that, if I can, I leave that out as far as I can down the road. And that way, no matter what, I don't have to worry about I stole somebody's idea, or I used that shape, or I used that thing. And then once something's approved, it's usually a Frankenstein monster, where somebody goes, oh, I like the nose on A, and I like the eyes of B, and I like the feet of C. And you go, that would be the ugliest creation ever. Okay. And you're like, yeah, good choices. And you go back and you go, oh, how do I fix this? And you do it, and you give them exactly what you want. And then so that's usually when I say when I try to plus something. So for the client, it'll be that they asked for, right? It'll be this one thing that they asked for, and then I go, I'll try to make this as pretty as I can, but this is really ugly what you chose. So because you're the client and you're paying me to give you what you want, here it is. But then here's this one. Here's a little of the things that you liked, but I think is more aesthetically pleasing. So I've done my job. I've given you what you want, and then I've tried to plus it and say, but I think this is a better option, and here's why. And that, it usually satisfies them, and they usually end up choosing part of this. Sometimes somebody down the road will go, no, I'm just really in love with these ideas, and you go, well, that's what I'm paid to do. It's not my project. I can't really dictate that stuff. So, but I feel satisfied when I give them what I think is my best work, and then give them what they want, because that's how I end up getting jobs with them later, is giving them what they want.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, you're totally right. I used to do that as well when they chose something which I thought it's strange. I'm like, okay, that's really weird. And then aside of it, but look at this. What do you think? I think that might work for you as well. Well, it satisfies you as an artist that you kind of did the best job you could do with what you had, and go, well, okay, that's still your choice, it's out of your hands, it's not like you just made something bad. So good. Like drop it there, and you are not happy about what you created, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, and when you were mentioning like different jobs, what was your first job right after when you finished studying, when you decided, okay, you don't want to do this, and maybe how did you get your first paid artistic job?
My first artistic paid job was I couldn't draw yet. So I was my first job was I was a 3D modeler and texture artist at Sony in Bend, Oregon. So that was my first job out of art school. Out of my entire portfolio, all this artwork, I had animation, everything. And Sony saw one turn of a bunch of props, and they're like, hey, look, that's a prop guy. Let's give him props and textures. And so I was like, well, I always thought to myself, you want to get your foot in the door so you can kick it down. That's what you're looking for, right? You're looking for that foot in the door so you can kick it down later. And so I took this job, moved with a couple of my other buddies. My first friend, Jason, he got the job there. And then he told us, we're all in school together, and he's like, hey, they're still looking for prop guys. They're looking for like junior prop guys to, do the siphon filter games. And so my other friend and I both applied, both got the jobs, both moved down to Bend, Oregon, rented a place together. And then we got our foot in the door by all doing props for Sony for like 9 months. And then they asked us to wait 3 months and then reapply, because they didn't want to, because if you work more than a certain contract, they have to pay for your medical and dental. So they want to give you 3 months off. And then he was like, oh, just find a job as a pizza guy and then come back in 3 months. And then that was a big decision for me, because I went back to Seattle and then got a job at Zipper Interactive making the SOCOM Navy SEAL games. Still a 3D artist, but I got that job, and then I ended up helping my other friend get a job with me there. So it was sort of like who you're networking with in school sort of becomes your buddies, and we play online together still to this day. So my art friends and I we're still pretty close. So, but yeah, that was my first job. And then once I was at Zipper Interactive, I remember the day that I was like, I can't do this anymore, because 3D is not my thing. I don't really enjoy it, but I had to research dead bodies being gassed.
Perfect.
For the video game. Yeah. And that was like, with my personality and everything, I was like, I'm done with this. I can't do this anymore. And I walked into my boss's office and I said, hey, I want to do concept art. I want to do something different than this. I want to move on. I don't want to do these sort of props and the swimming pool full of bodies. I'm done. So can I do concept art? Can I do like 50-50? And they're like, no, you're going to be a 3D guy. You're too valuable. And which was nice. But I went back to my office. I had just gotten married like a month before that, like a week to a month before that. I can't remember the exact time. And I called her up, and I called up Julie, and I said, like, can I quit my job, and can we just restart? Can we just move to California and restart? Because I need a big shift. And she was in Japan at the time, and she's like, sure, yeah, go ahead. I was like, really? She's like, sure. I was like, this is the best wife ever. Awesome. So I went into the office, and he's like, I think I have to quit. And he's like, nah, we're going to offer you $10,000 more a year to stay on as a 3D artist. And I went back to my room, called my wife again. I didn't tell her that part. I didn't tell her the part about the raise. I was like, you're sure? Because by the time you get back from Japan, I'm not going to have a job. She's like, no, do it. We'll figure it out. And then I went back in and I quit on the spot, gave my 2 weeks, and then we moved to California, and I ended up working at GameStop because I didn't have a job. So I ended up working at GameStop, which is a used video game store, and I was literally selling the games I had just finished making for Sony and Zipper Interactive. That was the most humbling sandwich to eat, is to have what most people say is hey, you got in, you have a career. And then now I'm back to square one, selling the very games that my name was in. And like, people wouldn't believe me. I'm like, hey, this is my game. It's like, sure, buddy, sure. It's like, yeah. It's like, oh, really? That's all right. So that was a good restart, but it really made all the other decisions easier, because once you start jumping and making big shifts like that, it makes all the little decisions like, well, if I could do that.
Yeah, because it can be scary at the beginning, exactly as you mentioned. Like, if I imagine to be unemployed, then you're like, but if you actually do it and then you see like nothing happened, then you're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's not that big. It's not that big a deal. So, sorry, that was a roundabout story, but that's kind of like from the first job to like being a concept artist, being a character designer. That was sort of the path.
And how did you do the networking when you were in California, when you moved, when you didn't know that many people, or did you already know some people there?
I didn't know anybody in California. So I couldn't afford classes because, again, I wasn't thinking long term when we left. So I actually interned and I answered the phone at Noman School of Visual Effects. And that paid for my classes there. And then I networked with everybody who would come in the door. I would help them out. Anybody who called up, I would talk to them. And then eventually a very nice Frenchman named David Levy. He's out in North Carolina now. But he came in, he was doing a Noman DVD, and we started talking, and he's like, oh, hey, I'm about to go to Texas. I'm starting this job. Show me your portfolio. And then hired me from the phone desk. And so I went out to Texas, and that kind of started the whole concept art phase of my career. So I went with him into Austin, and that was fun too. So.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you moved so much.
Yes, I have moved around a lot, but yeah, I mean, school is a good networking, but I found it really nice to sort of find my in by, like, it was very interesting to be just back to being sort of a schmo all over again, just answering phones. Hello, this is Noman School of Visual Effects. How can I direct your call? And you're directing your call to, more important people, but you ended up getting to know everybody, from that. So, you find your way.
Yeah.
You jump and you eventually sort of find where the cracks are, and you find how to network and do it your way. But there's no set standard way of doing it. And I'm not a schmoozer. I am not one of those like, hey, how's it going? You're walking around the party, shaking hands with people you don't know and pretending that you do. I can't. That's not me. So it has to come more naturally, which is like, how I ran into you. Much more of a natural process where you start talking, you're like, oh my gosh, let's have a conversation. This is awesome. Yeah.
I was like, it was fun. Yeah. So Designer Con and CT and so. What are the other conventions you go to, or something you maybe can recommend? Like, I obviously like them as well, and you.
Right. Well, I would say I've done San Diego for like 10 years now. San Diego Comic-Con is the big one. It's kind of like the Facebook of conventions. It's like the big one that you go to. But it's much easier when you have a booth because the networking kind of comes to you. You
Like
know,
I
when you're
came to
walking the
you.
floor. Yeah, exactly. You know, it's kind of easy. So CTN works. I love DesignerCon as well. San Diego's the big one. WonderCon, I usually do WonderCon as well. I did Angoulême a couple of years ago, and that was awesome. I mean, I just walked the floor. That was just me as a fan. I didn't actually like have a booth or anything like that, but that was really fun. So I've bounced around to a bunch of them, but a lot of the networking happens more by accident for me. It's not like I don't choose to go to something because it's an opportunity to do it. Because then no matter what, my personality is not me. It's because I'm only there to like who's in the room. And I've been around enough of those people that it feels really gross when I'm around them. It just goes, ugh. Oh, I don't like that. And so that sort of trains me again, like when I listen to biographies or, you know, I read books, I'm learning a lot more, not from what I do, but from learning what other people are doing. So I would see how they interact with me and I get that feeling. I go, oh, I don't want that. You know, it's kind of like Ian McCaig. He was talking, I've never met him, but he is one of the best speakers. The way he speaks to the audience and the way he talks about art and how much he loves it. I saw him talk and I just went, okay, that's how I want to explain things to people. I want them to be excited and I want to be a good personality. And oh my gosh, Ian McCaig is amazing, you know, also as an artist, but you know, just as him as a person. And so that's the sort of things I would glom onto. So I would sort of go, ooh, I don't like that personality. I don't want to be like that. And then you sort of like go, oh, I want to be like this. This makes me feel better about myself. So let's pass that on forward. So
yeah, the positive attitude and just influencing others. Yeah, definitely, that's really nice.
Yeah, yeah.
And
it's amazing. Being nice to other people is better networking than anything else I've ever been a part of.
Yeah, definitely.
Just be a nice person. Be a nice person.
Yeah, and then people appreciate it, and and you never know when also you can either have a friend or you can have a new job or whatever comes from it afterwards.
Definitely.
Yeah. And so when you also mentioned that you're working from on different projects, is it mainly from your office or do you also go to studios or how does it usually work for you?
I do both. So a lot of times there'll be like a kickoff and I'll go into a studio and to see all the artwork and see what they're doing and what they're building. And you get some good FaceTime. So you kind of get to have a rapport with the person in front of them. And then you can do all your work remotely after that. So I do have a studio here in Monrovia, California. But before that, I used to work just from the house. But then once we had a child, it was very hard to do. So now I have an outside office. But yeah, I'll go into to a studio, or even when I have to do pitches and stuff, I'll just be able to drive in, do that, and then come back to the office and do most of the work. So most of it's all done here at the office. But also easier because it's not bleeding into each other. So when I'm here, I'm working, and then when I go home, it's off and I'm with the family and I'm with my son and I don't think about it. I even started to turn off the phone after 7 p.m. just so, because I'll get like email dings and I'll get certain stuff and then it creeps back in and then all my son sees is dad. And all he sees is dad doing this. And that's not a good, that's not what I want my son to remember about me, so.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you can go to the forest or for walks or something like that. So do you have maybe some daily ritual which contributes to your success? Either walks in the nature or meditation or something which you do daily?
Yeah, I would say that I go to the same coffee shop. I love all my baristas. And so I talk to them every day. And then, because again, as a freelancer, I don't really interact with a lot of people during my day. So that almost becomes like, it's kind of like your milkman. You don't have that anymore, where you know your neighbors and the milkman and all that kind of stuff. But like that coffee shop is now that version. Hey, it's Brett. You go in and you talk and you know like which kids are going to school, which ones are going to be a nurse, who's going to go on to be a teacher. And then I just sit there and I draw for about an hour and a half. And that's just my time to get out ideas, and I screw up on purpose. So that is something that I've learned to do as well in my sketchbook, is not try to make a nice piece of art for the internet and for Instagram. It's to really push myself and say, screw up on purpose and see what you can do, because you always learn more from your mistakes than when something's right. You're like, hey, that worked out, and then you move on. But when you make something that is wrong or mistake worthy, you go, oh, let's not do that. Oh, that worked. Let's do that again. Ooh, that's a happy one. That's a happy mistake. And then, ooh, never again. That's the worst thing ever. But so I try to do that as my daily routine. And then, I'm also trying to work out more. So after reading the Drawn to Life books, where he really talked about there's a very physical connection between your physical health and your mental health as an artist. I've been trying to do that as well. So that's also now part of my routine, going on walks, working out in the morning, doing stuff like that. So I still play pickleball and volleyball. So there's a lot of things outside of art that makes it easier for my brain to concentrate on art. Because if I'm just sitting there shooting baskets or just running, that's where my brain gets bored, and that's where my best ideas come from. If I fill it with a bunch of music and everything going on, and a book I'm reading and then this movie on in the background, my brain is concentrating on all those things. So I need that sort of boredom space to be creative. So that's kind of what I've learned to do. So.
Yeah, definitely. It works as well for me when I'm exercising and thinking about like what I want to draw or the project that I'm working on, which I need to continue. It's like, oh, I can solve it like this. And then you continue exercising and you're like, okay, that works.
Yeah. And it's almost like you get a little bit of jolt when you're exercising. When you get that idea that works, you're like, oh yeah, I'm running a little bit faster now. Yeah, I'm good.
Yeah, exactly. See, I used to do that all the time with Lego when we had these giant projects, and I'm like, how would I make this work? And then I was on some treadmill or something, and I'm like, oh yeah, I can do this.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, definitely. And is there some maybe tool you kind of cannot live without, like favorite pencil or favorite sketchbook or software?
Man, that is a tough one. I would say out of everything, a brush pen. Like, I have my favorite types of brush pens, but I would say whether I'm in Photoshop, Sketchbook Pro, Manga Studio, at home, at a convention, that thick to thin line is super important to what I find appealing in my lines. And so I would say no matter where I'm at, even as a new program, I will try to, like Procreate, the first thing I did is try to make the brush pen that I wanted in that. So every program, it's pretty much a brush pen in some form is what I try to get down. So it's my favorite. I see other artists, that elegant, like thick to thin line and that beautiful stroke. It's so, I love it. I love it whenever somebody does it. So yeah, that's my favorite.
So you have one also as a physical brush pen, and then you recreate it in the software, or you buy it from somewhere, or how do you?
Yeah, some of them I'll make it, and sometimes it'll be part of a brush pack, you buy online. But yeah, so I have far too many. I'm looking around going, I have far too many brush pens, and I just fell in love with the new Copic one right here. Really nice, thick to thin lines. But Kuritakis I use almost all the time for the physical ones. But basically any brush pen, if it's around, I'll try it out, and I just like the feel of just that thick to thin lines. I used to do nothing but microns, which are for that little tiny detail. So I still use that for like little details, but I just really like that really flowy gestural lines of it. And then online, yeah, it's just finding out which pen kind of feels the same, and then tweaking its features to get that sort of feel, because everyone's hand moves a little bit different, so I kind of mess with even my Wacom features, where I press I have to press a little bit lighter and then I get a nice stroke. So I mess with all the little features and stuff to find something. So
Yeah, definitely. And when I'm looking at all the toys, what you have, what was maybe your like kind of influential thing when you were growing up, or along the way, maybe some either the series or books or I don't know styles.
so many. I will try not to bore you with all of them. I would say probably the biggest influence that after really thinking about it was most of the Rankin Bass stuff. I don't know if you know Rankin Bass. They did the Hobbit cartoon way back in the day. They did like Thundercats, Silverhawks. They did this series of shows. And when I look at my hands and I look the way I do a lot of the stuff, I go, oh, there's a lot of that influence in there. But I would say, Jim Henson was a big influence. All the stuff with the Muppets and Dark Crystal and Labyrinth, which is awesome because I get to work with them now. And it's like I have to keep myself from geeking out every moment of the day because like he was such a big influence. George Lucas, another one in all of his universe. So all the artists involved, but just the auteur behind these ideas, the person who started driving all of it is like impressive. And then Bill Watterson, Calvin and Hobbes, I think is probably the biggest. My son's middle name is Hobbes. So Bill Watterson was a huge impact on me as well. But you can all the way back from, He-Man, I was a product of the 80s and all the G.I. Joe, Transformers, He-Man, everything. So all of it has sort of played a role in shaping all those formative years that you don't really know that are happening to you at that time. Because there's influences that you try to bring in as an adult later, but you're very conscious of those. Yeah. You're like, oh, I am choosing this artist because I think they're really good. I'm going to let them sort of guide me on a designer. But there's all those formative years that you're not thinking about any of that stuff. And you're just a sponge of creativity and it's just jamming into you and you don't know what it is, but you're taking it all in. So I was born in a good era for that stuff. So.
Oh, definitely. And when you are creating now also your own stuff, what are your thoughts on personal branding and developing maybe the art style, or how important is personal branding for you?
Personal branding, I used to think was really important, and then I realized it was sort of holding me back a little bit because you're putting stipulations and a rule set on yourself. And so it was sort of becoming a little bit soulless in that pursuit where the art wasn't going where I wanted it to go. Yeah. It was going where I was making it go. Instead of a natural evolution, it was like, no, it's this. And so I was sort of like putting like little tapers on it, or not showing this piece of artwork because it had boobies on it, or not, stuff like that, where it just wasn't true to itself. It was more like me trying to stick to something. So branding is, I kind of switched it around to say branding is whatever I myself as an artist want to explore. That's my brand. Yeah. There is nothing else there. It's not, I'm not making a product for a company. I am the company. I'm the artist. And the reason I got into it is because I wanted to make art. And it wasn't because I wanted to make an established IP that everybody's going to identify with. It's going to be what came from me. So I've had to sort of bring back a little bit of my artist, the creator from back in the day. I had to kind of bring him back a little bit because I think we go through that, we go through those cycles. We go, oh, this is what I'm supposed to be. I'm now this professional and people are paying attention to me. So I better draw like this or better act like this or do this. And you sort of go on these little waves and these little kicks of what, society wants and then what you want and then what you're expecting yourself, because your expectations of yourself is different than expectations from the outside community as well.
Definitely.
So you're juggling all those things all at once. And then, so now I've had to start to kind of pull back a little bit and go, no, okay, the branding is really whatever you want to explore, you should be exploring, whether it be a kid comic book or an adult comic book or that drawing, it doesn't matter. It's coming from you. And that's my personal brand. But you had a second part of that question. I apologize. I can't
It was
remember it.
more the art style and branding. So you kind of answered
Oh,
it
the
in
art style.
the whole thing. So because some people can call it that, or if you are
Right.
also, you know, like you have a website or you create bags, or if there are like parts of things which kind of always goes through your art, like a vision or mission and these kind of things. So yeah, but
Right.
yeah.
Style, but I do want to mention that because a lot of my students, they still ask about style and say, like, how do you develop your style? And I think of style as this. Your style is always going to be changing, or in my opinion, should be changing, because you're taking in new information and new stuff every day. I mean, you should be a sponge your entire life, right? That's the great thing about art. The bad thing is that there's no roof, but it's also the great thing that there's no roof. So there's always something to learn and get better at. So your style, I think, will dictate where you're at that moment. But that's just if you stick with one thing, I don't think you're really exploring anymore. You're sort of staying put. And I think style will change with who you are and your influences at the time.
Yeah.
So I would hope 5 years from now, my artwork still looks like me, but it has expanded in some way and in trying something different. So style to me is much more amorphous, and I think most people are identifying with a brand from a studio. Most people, when they think of style, they think of a brand of a studio. What's the Dreamworks look? What is the feature film look? What's the TV work for Cartoon Network? What is the Nickelodeon look? What is the Disney look? What is the, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
And
But also,
individual artists, are
yeah, but
different.
if you create something like the world, you want to establish your own like brand or whatever, like certain style. So usually you have one kind of style if you are like selling maybe one art book with the same, I don't know, characters and universe, and then you want to kind of have the one branding with it and everything around it.
Definitely. If you're making like an IP, you're talking about a world. So you're talking, in my opinion, you're talking more about consistency than you are about style. Once you've decided the style, it's about just staying consistent within that rule set. So you can make up whatever rule set you want for that style, and then you work within that, and then you have a product that is that. But I think a lot of artists, generalists, I feel myself as a generalist, is you can kind of come in and out of certain illustration styles and certain design choices. Yeah, so you're like, oh, okay, this is what this has decided to be. You can work consistently within that style, and then the next one is going to be this. But I think a lot of people just think of style as like, I have to look like the Disney princess thing, and then they just gear everything towards that when there's more to it than just that as an artist. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely, yeah. Because it's more, as you mentioned, as a project, like, for example, if you take whatever, Harry Potter, and you see the scarf, that it's kind of the brand almost, you see it on someone and it's like, okay, that's it, so that's like the icon of it. So these kind of things, like, developing the brand of the idea maybe, then the artist, as you mentioned. Yeah. Okay, yeah. And what about maybe the income streams you have? Is it mainly through client projects or your products you are making, or how do you combine your income streams?
Well, I am under the belief that to really make it as a freelancer, I've been doing it for 8 or 9 years now, is you need multiple places to pull from. You need a lot of eggs in different baskets. So I would say primarily most of it comes from clients still. I would like to reverse that. I'm currently writing a couple first drafts for graphic novels, and I'd like to switch over into doing creator-owned stuff and finding a publisher and then sort of working through that. And so it's sort of like reversal of those things. Still taking on clients, but mostly it's my own ideas. But conventions are part of the equation. I have my book sales online. I have a digital store. I'm going to start doing some tutorial videos here. And my wife and I are just starting our business together, which is screen printing. So we're going to start doing that and going to boutiques and doing that as well. So those are probably the main ones. So it's a little bit of all of them, and then they sort of compensate for each other when, one client, doesn't pay on time, and then, so that you're not always living from paycheck to paycheck. So
yeah, definitely. Perfect. And then what about the future and maybe 5 to 10 years? What would be your dream scenario? You cannot fail. Everything is going according to your plan.
There's no failing. Oh my gosh,
No.
this is the best future ever. This is awesome. I would say more stories from myself, whether that be IP development at a studio to do, everyone wants to sell a pitch, but I'd like to be part of the pitch, not just like make something and then go, hey, made $1 and then it's away. Like I'd like to be a part of that. And then comics. I still have a huge love for comics. I still think that it is one of the purest forms from what your original artistic intent to somebody's eyeballs. That is the direct books and comics. You only have like an editor and maybe like 3 or 4 people involved, but that is a true translation of the artist and writer to the audience. When you get into like movies and TV and all the other stuff, there's a lot of people involved. So there's a lot of voices in there, but I still love comics. So I read them and go, wow, I really got what they meant from that story. So I still love them, and I'd like to continue to do them. So that's in the 5 to 10 year plan. I'm doing books, whether they be chapter books or graphic novels or whatever. So.
Perfect. Yeah, that sounds really good. And as you mentioned as well, like working with a big team on either short animation or feature film, there is always so many people and many opinions, many chefs or cooks in the kitchen, right? So
yes.
So, and what about like super far future, and what would you like to be remembered for in like 100 years?
Oh man. I did hear a good quote, and the only thing you take to your grave is your name. So I would really want people just to go, he was a nice guy.
Perfect.
Like I enjoyed him as a person. He made the world a better place than he left it. That's pretty much it.
That's nice. Yeah, I like it. And before we say goodbye, maybe you can share last piece of advice or key takeaway, and then we will finish.
Oh man. Let's see. My bit of advice is, advice to myself, I guess. Less internet, more work.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I would say to myself. But, I guess overall for everybody, I would say be happy with how far you've come, but not satisfied with where you're at. You'll always be a little bit hungry, but you should never degrade yourself with how far you've come. And that was a problem I had, where I thought the only way that I could get better is by really getting down on myself.
Yeah. And
it doesn't have to be that way. You can be happy with how far you've gone, but you shouldn't, just sit there and go, done. There should always be a little bit more hunger in there to not be the smartest guy in the room or gal in the room. Learn, keep finding that spark that goes forward. So.
Yeah,
does that make sense?
Yeah, totally agree. And just like never stop learning, and be nice to other people as well, as you mentioned, and let's keep inspiring each other. And thank you so much for joining. It was super nice, and thanks everyone who joined today as well, and see you in the next episode. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate you being here, and if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe because I post new videos every week. I would be also super happy if you let me know your thoughts in comments and give the video a thumbs up. You can find all the resources mentioned in this episode at artsideoflife.com. Just type a guest name in the search bar. There is also a couple of free artist resources ready for you. So if you want to listen to the interviews on the go too, make sure to check out the podcast at artsideoflife.com/podcast. Continue to inspire each other, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye!